Well, hello and welcome to Life Changing Finish Lines. I'm your host, Steve Tomboni, coach, race director, and CEO. This one is entitled "The Secret to Fitness and Wellness," and there's a secret that most endurance athletes don't talk about, and we should talk about it a lot more often. And it's called the secret to being fit and improving your wellness is to commit on an annual basis. And when I say commit, I say register. You got to register yourself for an event. And that's the secret. It's as simple as that, although there's a lot of planning underneath that, right? But the secret is to register for something. And I don't give a darn where you are in your fitness journey. You've done 12 Ironmans, and you want to do something else next year, or you have never even done a 5K, or you've done your first 5K. I mean, all along that continuum, every single year, commit to something. Back when I was training a tremendous amount, and I still do this to this day, in December, I always sit down and I say, okay, what do I want to do next year? I want to do 30,000 push-ups. Do I want to walk the Appalachian Trail? I mean, and again, I've done all kinds of crazy stuff. So for me, I have to kind of get outside the box. I'm not doing Ironman next year. I'm not going to run a half marathon anymore. I've done 50, 70 of them things. But I always try to find something to commit to and to register. And so that is a really big deal. And at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you one of the really big benefits of doing this. And it's massive, and you'll be blown away by the people in the endurance world that don't talk about this sort of thing, and we should do, and we should. So let's talk a little bit about registering. Again, it's really important to register for the right distance of things. So if you've never done anything, you're a beginner, and you want to register for 2, 3, 5Ks, your first 5K, you kind of spread that out. And I call it using the backwards method. I'm going to pick the race in the year that I want to start at. And if my first 5K is March 15th, whatever the date is, go backwards and be ready for that. And we'll talk about that in other videos on how to be ready for that. But you got to pick the right distance. And again, some of that is cumulative, right? If you decide you're going to do a 70.3 in October, well, you got time to go backwards all the way to January and kind of get your plan together and get your nutrition dialed in and your gear, and we'll get into all that stuff, right? But you have time. If you're planning on doing a half Ironman on March 1st and you haven't started riding the bike yet and it's January 1st or December 15th, you got some work to do. And some of that might not even be possible, and again, we'll talk about that. So the first number one secret is register, commit to something. The next secret is tell everybody what you're going to do. And that gives you accountability. It gives you motivation. It also keeps you honest with the people around you, right? If you tell your training mates, your spouse, your siblings, your friends, hey, I'm doing this half marathon, at some point they're going to say, we don't see you out there running or doing much, and you haven't been to the pool, the gym in a while, you're still doing that. So tell everyone you're going to do it. Another really important part of this is to plan the day of the event. And we'll get into all that crazy planning fun stuff, right? But one of the things that I tell people is plan to have family at the finish line. Plan to have someone there, take some pictures, have some fun with it. We'll get into why that's important other than having memorabilia and memories, right? But have someone there that can take your picture, that can be there for you at the finish line. And again, sometimes these finish lines, you really push yourself and you really don't or shouldn't be driving home and that sort of thing. So again, once you get to that basic stuff, you kind of lay out the calendar, you kind of decide, that doesn't mean the calendar is not going to change. I tell everyone, if you can get 75% of your goals done on a daily, weekly, quarterly, annual basis, you're doing pretty darn good, because it's a lot harder than it looks. But the next thing you want to do is line up things ahead of time. So for an example, if I'm going to do a half marathon in May, well, then I probably want to do a couple of 5Ks in the early spring at a race, sign up for, register for, Again, what we always used to do is we would sit down in the last week of December, back in the old days when there was just paper, right? We would gather up all those paper applications and we'd just send money. Check for this, check for that, yada, yada, we're done. We didn't want to think about it. Part of that is because you don't know how much they cost. But again, at the bottom of this video, we'll talk about that expense of racing and where that lands in the real world. So line things up. If you're going to do Ironman next year, if you're going to do a half Ironman, if you do your first sprint triathlon, kind of start going backwards and line up other events that will be an important part of your journey to get to that A race. And we'll talk about that A race. But part of that is having a coach to help you sit down and say, this is good news, this one's good news, this one's bad news. You know, look, if I'm doing my first half marathon in the spring, you know, I'm not doing a 15K the Saturday before. Your coach is going to go, well, wait a second, if you've never ran 13.1 miles before, but you want to run the race pace 9.3 the Saturday before the race, that might not be a good idea. Let's rethink that. Maybe let's find something different. Let's find a 10K a couple weeks before that. You know, there's that whole taper thing and being ready and all that. But having a coach is really important to kind of lay out your goals and objectives and not be super over aggressive or super under aggressive. Because again, you want to get to that A race, and we're about to talk about that at A race. One of the things that I always was told in the years ago is never show up for a half marathon, half Ironman, full Ironman, dead as a doorknob, French fried, standing there trying to race on that day. You got to show up excited, fired up, can't wait. You know, instead of having, 90% of your energy, you got 99.5. You're fired up. Because showing up dead as a doorknob, you're thinking your body's about to start having shingles, or dude, that's awful. So the A race. List out a plan for your A race is really important. What you want to get out of this A race, again, the timeline is set up correctly. You know, look, if you've never done a 5K in your entire life and it's December 15th and you're going to do your A race on January 1st in your first 5K and you've never ran before and you want to break 20 minutes, that might not be the goal for you. January 1st and you only got 15 days, no. So think about it. Really think about, can you make this A race? Can you financially, time-wise commitment, family commitments, job, money, gear, all that stuff. Can you do your A race and be honest about it? Again, a great chance to sit down with your coach, talk to him, say, hey, is Ironman in my cards? And it's and the Ironman I want to do from a vacation standpoint, destination vacations and all that fun stuff, right, is June 1st. When your coach looks at your plan and says, but you can't swim a stick, and you can't swim at all, and it's now, December 15th, Ironman in June, in my opinion, as a coach, as an athlete that's done all this crazy stuff, no, that's really crazy. So you got to really think about this. That's where the part where without a plan, you plan to fail. I mean, might be a military term, but it still works in this case, right? Without a plan, you plan to fail. So you really got to sit down and think about this. Who is going to do this with you? I love having teammates, race mates, people that I'm going to train with, who can be there for you. And again, let's go back up there and talk about who's going to be there for you from a family standpoint. Who's going to be your kind of Sherpa, which again, Sherpas are really a big deal. I mean, again, the part where you talk about you can't raise kids without a village, and I think it's so appropriate for the endurance world. You can't raise an endurance athlete without a village, your family, and having them by your side. So think about that. Who is going to be with you training in the next month, in the next 6 months, in the next year? We'll get into when I did Ironman. We can talk about that, and we can kind of sort of be ready for that. We'll talk about what I did to get ready for Ironman Florida when I did it. But again, one of the most important things is race day. So we'll talk about having a plan on race day and how that all works out and how important it is to have literally almost the same plan for those events before your big A race. That's why I always say, look, if you're doing a half Ironman, you better be doing 2 or 3 sprints, an Olympic distance before, get all the bugs worked out and get your nutrition figured out. And get your bike figured out and swim and what hurts. Again, one of the most important things that I always did was I would do a bunch of races leading up to my big A race and I would go really freaking hard. So I could find out what physically, hey, my hamstring is this calf, maybe these shoes don't work anymore. Hey, my bike position sucked or it didn't suck. My nutrition sucked or it didn't suck. Because look, you get out into some of these crazy distances and the last thing you want is the mistakes that you've made on your own because you forgot to bring the right gel or you left your water bottle. So you practice those things and you get all that stuff ready for you, right? Here's another really big thing. Why are you there? Before you sign up for your A race, think about why you're there. Why are you going to do this? If it's just personal aggrandizement, okay, great, but write that down. If it's to be an example for your kids, for your teammates, for your spouse, for your workers, figure out why you're there. If this is leadership by example, then that should be part of it, right? If it's your sponsor's paying you a bunch of money to ride the bike, okay, well that's a reason, and that might be a little bit of a why. But I'm gonna tell you right now, folks, when you're out there 112 miles or even 10 miles and shit hurts, the money in the bank ain't gonna make no difference. It's still gonna hurt, and you didn't have a good enough plan, and it's all that. You're there for the wrong reason. We'll talk about one of my reasons why I did Ironman Florida years ago, right? So you kind of go through the list, right, of why you're there and who's gonna be with you and how you're gonna do this. How are you gonna do it with the right coach? Are you gonna have teammates? Is the family correct? Do you have a plan for massage and yoga? Is your gear plan all figured out? Because again, look, if you don't have a gear plan and you're gonna still wear the same running shoes that you wore in high school 15 years ago to do your first 5K, I'm gonna promise you that when you start training for your first 5K and you wear those same shoes, your shins are gonna suck, your calves are gonna suck, your back's gonna hurt because there's no midsole left in them. So, be prepared for spending money on gear and having a good plan. And then, of course, the whole adage in the military world that no plan survives contact with the enemy. I can't tell you how many things have broke in the middle of a season when I didn't plan for them to break. And now I need a new chain. Oh, my favorite guys at the bike shop, they're like, hey, these gears are toast, man. You need a whole new Grupo. And you realize your aero bars, the bracket is rusted shut. Oops. All right, so, and then obviously you got to be ready for the trip if you're going to do something. Because the financial commitment to some of this stuff is crazy fun and crazy vacation. And be honest with yourself, if you're going to do something and you tag it onto a family vacation, that's what a lot of endurance athletes do because it's kind of an excuse to be in Florida, California, Nevada at really cool times. And a lot of races are destination oriented, so it's fun for the family, and you can decide whether you want to be dead at the beginning of the vacation or at the end of the vacation. I always chose to be dead at the beginning of the vacation, and then I would just lay on the beach and do absolutely nothing for literally a whole week, maybe more. So the perfect example is when I did Ironman, right? So when I did Ironman Florida, I had a 2-year plan. I talked to all my friends who had done tons of them, and they were kind of my coaches, mentors. There weren't a lot of coaches back then that did all this, so I relied on my buddies that had done it and listened to everything they had to say. So I had a 2-year plan. I told everybody I was signing up on January 1st. So I spent a whole year gathering up my teammates, and crazy enough, I ended up with 10 of them plus me. We had 11 of us doing the same race together. So talk about the who. I had somebody to swim, bike, run with every freaking day. Had a great time. 11 of us finished, but we had a whole plan then for January 1st, races November. I got 11 months to figure out, and we laid out, all of us got together. There was some beer and pizza involved, and we laid this whole thing out of what we were gonna do. We ended up with 9 guys riding a century every Sunday, the 5 weeks before the race. So 5 Sundays in a row, we rode a century. And then we skipped a week, we did 50%, right? We tapered, but how much fun was that? But we had a plan, and we laid this whole thing out, and we planned the trip out, and 6 of us stayed in one condo unit, and across the street, the other 5 guys and their family stayed in the other condo unit. So there were 44 of us for breakfast, lunch, and dinner wherever we went. Families were all there and had a great time. And we wore the same jerseys, not the same shorts or the same, that sort of stuff, biking shorts or running shorts. We all had the same jerseys on. Super fun. We'll get into that at some point. But Florida, Ironman Florida was the example of, I spent 8 years racing triathlons. And I spent a year planning it and a year doing the planning for the race. So it took me a whole 2 years. But that 8 years before, I made every possible mistake in the triathlon world you can make, literally almost blacking out in races because I had not enough food on the bike. So it was crazy, but I had a good plan by the time I'd been doing it for 8 years. So I told you we'd do something at the end here, and the end is one of the other big secrets that people don't talk about and needs to be talked about more in this country is the medical benefit. I mean, look, I spent 30 years doing this, and I spent nearly zero. I have no medication. Yeah, I could probably stand to lose a few pounds, but all my numbers are perfect. When I go to the doctor, the nurse comes in and goes, "Why aren't you on any medication? You're in your 60s now. You got to be on blood pressure medicine." Nope. You're on cholesterol medicine. Nope. You don't have any diabetes. Your numbers are. How do you do that? And I go, well, I still do a lot of really big fitness stuff, right? But it's the medical benefit of not being on any medication, of eating right, of sleeping right, look, even though I don't race anymore, if I'm going to do an 11-mile hike, I just do it backwards, right? If New Year's Day I'm going to hike 11 miles, first of all, I don't give a shit what the weather is. I just do it. But I do, 6 6s, and I do 4 8s, and I do 2 10s. And so I know how to do all that stuff, right? I got that in my head. I got the shoes, I got the gear, I got the knife, I'm going to hike 11 miles, right? Whatever. So, but the medical benefits are massive. It's exercise by prescription, right? But it's exercise prescription that works for me, that what motivates me. I don't get motivated anymore by riding centuries for time. I get motivated by riding centuries on my bike because I love being out there. And I love riding on greenways, and I love going to a destination. And oh wow, from this point to this point is 100 miles. Well, we're gonna, somebody's gonna meet me over here. I'm gonna ride that whole 100 miles, have a great time. Honestly, I don't even wear a watch anymore. But the medical benefits are massive, and really needs to be addressed by what you get out of this. So look, if I spent $4,000 doing Ironman Florida, gear, trip, food, we won't talk about, how much money I spent on massage, because that was really a big deal. But what did that do? How much money did I spend on any other medical things that year? How much have I spent for all those years? I don't spend any money. So I look at it as race entry fees, gear, massage, YMCA gym memberships, all that stuff. It's just preventative maintenance for this thing, this thing that God has given me, this body, which I try to keep fit, and I try not to, put crazy stuff in. And I know that if I drink 3 beers a night before a race, it's not going to go well at all. So I just don't drink, right? It doesn't work for me. I've had friends that can drink 9 beers a night before a race, get up and win the age group, qualify for Ironman. I can't do that, but I know. And so it works out great. And it's beautiful for you, right? Because spending almost no money on medical insurance, when I go to the doctor and I have the thinnest file of anybody that's ever been there, I like that. When I go see my doc for an annual physical, the nurse always comes out, and it's always somebody new, and they go, "Sir, do you go by a different name or something?" I'm like, "No." They're like, but your file is like this big. There's only one sheet in there. It's who your medical insurance provider is. It's like a copy of my card. Well, that's the way I like it. So go get them. Have a plan. Remember, the secret is to register, commit, tell your friends, tell your family. Go get them.